All right, here we're looking at 3.3b. I've noticed that there was a lack of practice problems that I was doing for this. So I wanted to go ahead and put together a few more problems just so you guys get the idea of how this works. So let's start off and let's get a couple of functions together. Let's say we have f of x equals, I don't know, let's go with x plus 3, right? And then let's do a g of x that equals 5x. And then let's do an h of x that equals, let's go with, let's go with x squared plus 2x plus 1. Let's do that. All right, so now we have three completely different functions. Right, f is x plus 3. G is 5x, and then h is x squared plus 2x plus 1, right? So let's just say we take one function, we want to plug it into another. So let's say we want to let's take a look at what happens if we do f, and we plug in, let's do the g function, and let's say we do that at -1. All right, so here's going to be the first example problem, and it's going to say simplify, or it's going to say, compute, something along these lines, right? So here, what we're looking at is the g function. The g function is going to go inside the f function. So when I look at this, so you don't have to write this down, but I'm going to write this down. I'm going to say note that g of -1 is going to go inside f, the f function, inside the f function. Right? So g of -1 is going to go inside of f. Well, that's true, right? G of -1 is inside the f function. So that means I'm going to do g of -1, which means I have to replace this x with -1, and then the whole thing's going to go in here. Well, what does that look like? Well, here we have, I'm going to show you two methods. I'm going to show you two separate methods. All right, so the first method I'm going to show you is where we do the whole thing at once. So we're going to do the whole problem at once. So whole problem at once. And then I'm going to do this. The second method is going to be in pieces. So we're going to do the problem in pieces, or stages. I'm going to call it stages. All right. So if we're going to do the whole problem at once, that means here it says that g of -1 is going to go inside of f. Well, f is x plus 3, right? So here I need x plus 3. Right? The f function, the outermost function is f. So the whole thing should look like f, and f is x plus 3. So notice I have big old parentheses where x used to be, x plus 3. And now the g function is going to go in here, but g of -1 is going to go in here. Well, g of -1 would be 5 times -1, so it would be 5 times -1 like so. And now we can simplify. 5 times -1 is -5 plus 3, and -5 plus 3 is -2. So that means f of g of -1 is -2, right? Now, if I do this in stages, I'm going to work my way inside, out. I'm going to go inside, out, which means I'm going to do the inside first, and then I'll do the outside. So the goal, again, is f of g of -1. So I got to go find g of -1 first. G of -1. Well, g of -1 is going to be 5 times -1, which is -5. So then g of -1 equals -5, right? So that -5 is going to be replacing g of -1. So now I'm looking for f of -5. F of -5 I have to replace here, so I say -5 plus 3. So f of -5 then is -2. Oh, sorry, ran off the page. All right, let's do another example. And again, I'm going to do this in both ways. Let's do another example here. Let's do, let's go with h composed oh, excuse me. I want to write it like this. H composed with G at -3. Okay. Now remember, when it comes to these, that open circle there says composed with. I'm going to rewrite my letters, my functions, my letters, and my numbers in the same order. H, G, -3. But now I'm going to rewrite my parentheses to see that the G of -3 is going to go in for H. So that means H of G of -3 is, and now H is my outside, right? Well, go back to the function here. H is x squared plus 2x plus 1. So we go here and we say x squared plus 2x plus 1. And now I want to put G of -3 in here. All right, well, remember the G function is 5x. So in order to plug the G function in here, it's going to be 5x. 5x. And inside here is the -3. All right, it's hard to see. That's -3 in there. My handwriting's terrible today. All right. So 5 times -3 is -15. So here we have -15 squared plus 2 times -15 plus 1. -15 squared is going to be -15 times -15. And I believe, if I know, I need a calculator here. I am not good with anything over 14. I am awful. 225. All right, so here we get 225. 2 times -15 is going to be -30 plus 1. 225 minus 30 is 195 plus 1 is 196. Woo-woo. Now, if I'm going to do this in stages, right? If I want to do this in stages, H composed with G of -3 is H of G of -3. All right, I like it like this because this reminds me that the G of -3 is going in for H. So let's go find G of -3 to start with. Well, G of -3 is going to be 5 times -3. As we've already seen, that's going to be -15. So now I need to take G of -3 out, and I'm going to replace -15 in for G of -3. So now I'm looking for H of -15. And that's going to give me, remember, x squared plus 2x plus 1. And I'm going to throw my -15 in there. And as we've already seen, because I got the calculator, -15 squared is 225. 2 times -15 is -30 plus 1. 195 plus 1 is 196. Right? So the work is really the same. It's just how you think of it. Do you want to plug it all in at once to get started and then work your way through the parentheses first, then your exponents, multiplication, addition, subtraction? Or do you like going through and finding, well, what's the inside one? Let's go figure out the inside number first and then take that and plug it into the outside function. All right? So either way you look at it is completely acceptable.